the meeting in the private sector. So, right. First of all, can I have any apologies for absence, please? Was it?
Yes, so we have apologies from Councillor Misley and Sue Summers, thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying that I'm a little concerned that we haven't had any representation from Solihull for the last few meetings. So I think obviously we're going into a municipal year. I think we need to write and find we're not going to get any representation from that. Anyway, we move on to any declarations of interest, please. Right, thank you. Right, go to the minutes of the 7th of April. Does anybody have any? No. No.
Just to note that at the Combined Authority Board meeting on Friday, the chair of PDOS formally acknowledged the request that they apply pressure to Network Rail in respect to the matters that Councillor Boyle raised at this meeting last time then.
Thank you, that's right.
Good luck with that.
I know, but we said we'd do it, so we've done it.
I will go to part of the minutes in 135 where it says if matters remain outstanding, that we set up a meeting. I don't know whether you think that would be helpful. Yeah. The there and the respective council.
So which item are we talking about? Sorry,
We're talking in relation to the Network Rail. Right.
there's lots of meetings I'd like with various different people. Do you want to narrow it down specifically?
Well, we said we'd have officers from the Combined Authority, Coventry, Warwickshire, and I would imagine we try and get Network Rail to the.
It's in relation to the Bay platform.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to follow that up any time you like. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Can we?
But that's further in relation to the wider points around trying to connect this with the connections with the East Midlands. Yeah, and well, it's.
Do you think it's worthwhile? That's what I'm asking. But it's, you know, we agree.
We Network Rail, we really don't. But I do think it's worthwhile raising these things politically in any place that we can. I think raising things with Network Rail is like talking to a wall. But you know, I'm quite happy to do it because I've done it before.
Yeah. Well, we'll try it again. Okay. If everybody accepts those minutes, then we go on to item 4, the end and the investment programme update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So funding commitment remains unchanged. 3 million versus funding available for combined interest rate was 871. The balance being made up within our contributions approved by the CA board. Cost incurred for borrowings to the end of February were 695.5 million. It's a small increase, but we just got 40 things to come through now, so that will we see a market jump as we report next time the board. There is a note in we've got around the property investment that report later as a separate item in the board session that's administered by delegation to Black Country local authorities. Just to note, there's recording shortfall outputs target of 317 homes, so it's not 2-1 that's in the notes, but there's also an opportunity to ask whether the output is presented later in the second. Since the last board meeting, CA officers have exercised delegation powers to approve business cases as follows. So the 3 Coventry change requests where you all know we had outstanding information awaited, that's now been received. The submissions are now complete and they've been approved to extend the timescale. So that's noted on the dashboard. And there's one on Solihull Scheme A46 Link Road Phase 3, which had its expiry date extended, no budgetary implications in either of those. As previously reported, MHCLG have removed their 5-year gateway process or reviews for the investment programme, replaced that with the annual conversation. We reported that in writing quite a few times through the board, so with that matter now dealt with and the local evaluation framework in place, my intention is not to raise this as a specific item and report by exception only in future.
Got any questions or points? No. The only thing I would say is that over the course of the last 12 months, we've managed to get down the red status projects. So at least we're clear on most of the projects that we have in front of us. There's just a few left which you on top of, aren't you, by the sound?
Yeah, if you want me to continue.
Yeah, if you don't want to.
Okay, students have no questions. So I'd be that forward, as usual, there's 24 projects, there's no change there. There's 32 that have now reached completion, so that's an increase of 2. We have the red status on the projects. There's 6 projects remaining as red. Obviously, these come and go, so just as soon as we do, that is an improvement on 4 on the last session and a massive improvement on 23 that have a red status in January. And the red status projects, there's 4 on the SMBC UKC infrastructure package. We're waiting for a completion date. There's 2 TFWM projects, the Metro project, Birmingham East Side, haven't called decisions by CA board on Friday, but that was a trigger for reporting on that. So hopefully it will be dealt with. And then the Southern Coalfield project, which as well was impacted by cross funding, which I believe was discussed at CA board on Friday. So both of those will now be able to get the updates and scope will change across as appropriately.
Any questions or things to write?
I think it's partly answered my question. It was just around an update on the Sutton Coalfield Gateway. I think the rebasing paper was submitted for cross twos on Friday. Was that agreed? Is this back on track now?
I wasn't in that board session, so I'm not too sure. I'll catch up with colleagues and kind of will just report back next board. Sandeep will be on the Wednesday.
Thank you, Councillor Mahmood. So yes, the paper that was presented to CA board on Friday was approved, which has got some re-profiled spend dates for the Southern Gateway project, which were referenced as well, which will be referenced within the change request that's going on.
Any other questions then or points to be made? No? Can we note that report then? We move on to the report on the city street and sustainable plans. Sandy.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So the paper is the regular quarterly reporting that we provide on the West Midlands Regional CRSTS programme, setting out areas of spend against the programme, so sort of the key risks. What I just wanted to focus on today, and it was a very good question, Councillor Mood, because it sort of is a nice segue into the recent paper that we've taken up to CA board on rebaselining our CRSTS programme, which is set out within the paper as well. So we've seen really good performance against our overall programme across the West Midlands, and those figures are noted within the report. And whilst there has been some really strong performance, the overall spend against our regional programme is lower than anticipated. That is something that we have picked up in a number of quarterly reports, but also the reporting that we do to the Department for Transport. So as a result of that, there has been a number of discussions held with all scheme promoters and local authorities over the past 2 months on getting an update in terms of a realistic view on spend across all of their project areas, and making sure that we are not handing any money back to government if there is an underspend against CRSTS1. So as a result, there was a fundamental review undertaken, which has manifested itself in the paper that went up to CA board last week. What that has done is identified a number of projects which, for whatever reason, are not likely to deliver during the initial CRSTS1 period. This is a combination of factors, whether it's just delays in terms of being able to do the development down to capacity and capability, whether there's been issues with cost increases and supply chain challenges, or making sure that there is the right level of political support and commitment as those projects have gone through public consultation. But there is, a number of reasons behind those delays, and I will draw out that is nothing unique to the West Midlands. This is something that every MCA area has been dealing with their city region sustainable transport settlement projects. So with the view of not wanting to hand any money back, it is how do we repurpose that funding within the current period, so spend by March 27 on projects that are aligned to not just our LTP priorities but also mayoral transport priorities, and have a very high level of deliverability. What happens to the deferred projects if nothing changes? They are just being delivered a little bit later on. The funding for the development and the ongoing approvals that they need to seek would continue as they are. So no projects are paused or stopped. Everything continues for development, but it's just the delivery timelines that have been pushed out. What that's also given us the opportunity to do, though, is to bring in projects of a similar value to utilise that funding that's been released. And the board paper that went last week sets out those areas. So there's an uplift in highways maintenance, there's an uplift in local network improvement plans, there is funding agreed for the Birmingham East Side Metro Extension Section 4, funding agreed for Sprint Phase 2 in Birmingham and the Black Country, and the Sprint vehicles, which are the final part of that jigsaw. There are some smaller elements around interfaces for Metro in Wolverhampton and Dudley. And then there is a capital to revenue switch, which we are allowed to undertake in the final year of CRSTS, and that is to support the broader deficits that we have on operational budgets across the transport system in future years. So the next stage of the process now will be to agree those changes with DfT. We are hoping a lot of those can be dealt with through local delegations that we have as part of our MOU with government on CRSTS funding, but that paper was agreed on Friday at CA board. But the rest of the report is as read. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
And the board,
I could make a quite sarky comment at the start, about underspend of crusts. If you keep on spending it on Midland Metro, you'll overspend, not underspend on crusts. But put that to one side. What this report doesn't really identify, and I know it's high level, and this is part of the problem that we have really in terms of transport scheme generally. It doesn't really identify. There's a table at the back here that talks about schemes, but I don't know quite what they relate to in relation to the report you just given, where it project, walk, cycle and bus corridor, Midland Metro depot. There's all these, there's some commentary and no commentary. How does that relate to this report, number one? Number two, you refer to the fact that there are some schemes think plus one that may, the phrase you used, Sandy, they don't have political support, which begs an obvious question. Well, how come they got in crusts on in the first place if they don't have political support? I know, back in Coventry, we're on schedule of our crust spend, and that's clearly identified and clear. And that's because we do have that political support. And the problem I have is there is no, again, political oversight at a level here that feeds into the decisions or reports that are made by colleagues like yourself, Sandy. That's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of the system here at the Combined Authority that is clearly not working. There's clearly a disconnect, once again, between political oversight back in the authorities and ultimately decisions that need or need not to be made here at the Combined Authority. And that is holding things back massively, and something needs to change. And that's it's just not right. But I'll be talking about that at another stage, another place, because this is not working. And if this carries on like this, I'll be saying time and time again, it's not working, because there is no political understanding of how transport schemes are initially brought forward and then are delivered. And without political support, it will never happen.
Thank you, Councillor O'Boyle. So on the first question around the summaries that are in the back, these are the standard summaries that we've been producing for the investment board updates. What we do have are far more detailed dashboard updates that go to the Transport Delivery Overview Scrutiny Committee, that rolls off the tongue, on the wider capital reporting. That's for all projects within the CRSTS programme, and that report is taken on a bi-monthly basis via that committee. Apologies if it came across as political support. I think I said public support, not political support. And that's largely through a recognition that a lot of the projects in CRSTS1 were relatively immature at the point that they were identified, where very little development work had been done. As those projects had matured and they've gone out under public consultation, particularly in some areas where we've had to consider things like road space reallocation, thinking about putting in cycle lanes, for example. I'm not saying that's always the case. There has been slightly more work to be done. I'm not saying that those schemes have been rejected and thrown out, but it has led to more design work, which has taken longer, hence those delivery dates being pushed out. In terms of your comments around how does this all come together and how does it work, it largely works through the Strategic Transport Officers Group in terms of projects coming forward through STOG, and then it follows the governance process that has been defined in terms of the value of the project. So dependent on the delegated authority levels on the spend. Obviously, once the projects have been identified, that was a CA board decision in terms of these are all the projects within the West Midlands CRSTS programme. There is then delegated responsibility through investment board here and the Transport Delivery Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And the thing that sort of joins them all together will be the SAF process in terms of the value of the projects and where they go for the relevant approvals during their project milestones and life cycle. I can appreciate sometimes it does look a little bit unjoined up, but behind the scenes there is a system. It has taken a bit of time for that to bed in and work. It's been our first multi-year settlement. It's been our first 5-year period where we're putting a lot of projects through, and there's lots of lessons learned, and we're trying to make sure we're improving that process and making sure it's efficient. And one of the things that I will point out is counter to some of the areas which have often challenged some of the processes. Coventry has had no projects being deferred at all because they are on track and are delivering exactly to their programmes. So they've been able to work with the systems and processes in place to ensure that delivery is happening. So there is some good lessons learned. There's some good examples out there. And there's probably some best practice to apply as well in terms of maturing that overall programme visibility.
Councillor O'Boyle, then Councillor.
Just come back and thank you for that, Sandy. I think, as I sort of said in my perhaps not very clear way, I have absolutely no doubt that processes are followed. And officers of the Combined Authority will make very well sure of that. But that's part of the problem. It's somewhat opaque. And the reason why I said that Coventry didn't have any issues with timing is because we're making decisions in advance of actually decisions made at the Combined Authority at our own risk. No other local authorities, and Solihull's one of them, will not do that. And that is a problem with your processes, number one. Number two, as I said, political support, which I appreciate is a phrase you use, but put that to one side. There's a political disconnect. The Strategic Transport Officers Group is a group of officers. As it happens, my officers report directly to me, and I've got a good oversight of what is happening. But where you've got TDOS all of those members of TDOS, not one of those people have a strategic role to play in transport back in their own authorities. There's a complete disconnect. And to me, it quite frankly, it suits the authority not to have that political oversight. There is a complete and utter gap in political oversight of any decisions and money being spent. That is the problem. And as I said, I'll be bringing something forward to the Mayor in the next few weeks on this, because it's clearly and utterly a democratic deficit, and it's having a direct impact on our ability to deliver projects ultimately that do have that political support and can be identified throughout the process. And that's why we end up with high level stuff. And if you go to the Cabal Authority, come to Investment Board, some of these reports, unless we spend hours and hours interrogating them through different people at different times to understand exactly the whole kind of process that goes on here, we won't understand, and we just generally nod them through. And that is a real problem, Pete, and it's something that needs to be sorted out. And I'm going to do my bit on that, but there's no doubt about it, that is happening. And that, quite frankly, is unacceptable, and it's got to be changed, Chair.
Councillor Ball, I'm hearing what you're saying. You're feeling that it's basically combined authority officer with district officer input driven. Yeah, is that what you're saying? And I think the other thing is that if you are going to be writing to the Mayor or taking it up with the Mayor, I think the rest of us would like to, if you could share your thoughts in relation to that, if you're going to put anything in writing, Councillor Ball, so that we know what you're picking up and whether it's something that the board itself can deal with.
It's part of the Richard allegedly appointed me as his political oversight on his transport review that I've been pressing for over nearly 12 months now. And I had a meeting with him a couple of weeks ago, along with Adrian Andrews, who's from Walsall, who's supportive of the points I'm making. And I'm sharing a paper as we speak. I'm happy to circulate it, but basically what I just said is kind of the format of it. The reality is that the oversight process, the political input, the Mayor with the greatest, no matter who the Mayor is, they can't oversee and understand the day-to-day decisions that are being taken in order to bring these forward. And there needs to be that proper political oversight, and that doesn't exist at the moment. There just isn't the time in the world to do it.
Before I go to Councillor Burden, can you tell me, Sandy, about our nomination to the Transport for West Midlands, what oversight they have in relation to this? And the other thing is, do you think the nominees basically are up to speed with some of the paperwork that they receive, and what training are they given if they've been appointed for the first time?
I'll go back to some of my previous comments, Chair. So in terms of the development of the programmes and acceptance of what projects are within them was agreed at CA board. So that is something that's taken at that level, and there would have been briefings that happen at various levels before it would have got to CA board. The roles that Investment Board and TDOS have generally are to oversee and provide the monitoring function around that established programme. Obviously, if there are changes to that programme, that comes back via the appropriate governance level. So change requests could potentially land here depending on their value or their scope of change on any projects that are being taken forward. In terms of TDOS's role, theirs is largely around the capital monitoring. And that role is not new to TDOS. In its previous guise as TDC, there would have been regular capital reporting presented to them on the capital programme. The only change that has happened under TDOS is that it is broader, in the sense that all capital projects across a number of funding streams are sent through as part of our overall capital monitoring. So there are the member engagement groups which allow for further conversation around those if there is areas of uncertainty or clarity needed to be provided. The other aspect of this is the role of TDOS in providing deep dives into the overall health of these programmes as part of their capital monitoring responsibility. And again, as part of the CA board paper that went last week, there is a recommendation around TDOS establishing a program of deep dives for the remainder of the program. Now we have a rebaseline program to ensure that the projects are doing what they need to do and are delivering against the milestones that have been established. So those are the areas that I think are pertinent for this board to be aware of. I'm not sure or can't comment on any training provided around that. But as I say, the function that TDOSC is undertaking is nothing new. It's something that has been historically established through the Transport Delivery Committee and then carried forward into TDOSC.
Okay, Councillor Burden.
I'm not going to labour the point, but I think to summarise what Councillor O'Boyle's concern is, you have WMCA board, which is broadly constituted of leaders and deputy leaders, who then delegate the authority to us, who are broadly constituted of cabinet members. So thankfully that's correct for all authorities. And then we are becoming the ultimate arbiters of papers that are scrutinised by what are typically either political appointees from the backbench or, in Wolverhampton's case, elected appointees from the backbench. I don't know if everyone does it that way. So the issue we've got, none of those three have any reporting function to each other, nor do they have any mechanism of reporting function other than us willingly going through and reading the minutes of their paper or us having to go there. So while the officers, and I have absolutely no concern from a governance point, I think the governance is legal and sound, but from the political side of it doesn't function because none of the three groups are interrelated into reporting groups. They are three distinct groups on three distinct panels that do not interact or function with each other. That means the WMCA board is two levels of governance removed from where any scrutiny of function has happened. We are having to become the ultimate arbiters of it without having been involved in the scrutiny process. And then we report that to WMCA board that we've arbitrated it, yes or no. That is a fundamental, from a political side, that's the core summary of the issue that I think Councillor O'Boyle's raised. And I think some of it comes from the fact that we don't have an appointed cabinet member delegate that is the liaison function. It's the lack of liaison function. It's not the process, because as you've just outlined, all of the processes individually are functional legal processes. It's how the processes work on this side. They work on the officer side, which is why I think they haven't been detected until Councillor O'Boyle's raising it in this manner, because the political side, the process isn't functioning, but the legal and technical side, it is working. But then that is where you encounter the things that officers correctly work out how much something costs and that it would be a net benefit without having the discussion of actually how do people react to this on the ground, which is why Councillor O'Boyle is conflating the public and political opinions. We know and could have pre-warned. We're not saying we would have changed what you'd have done, but we would have pre-warned you this is what would come up in consultation, etc. Not to prejudice anything, but would have had that element of functionality. It's because there's just not a running thread on our side, and this is true of lots of boards at WMCA, if we're quite honest. The running thread between leader, cabinet, backbencher that perform these functions doesn't exist. It only exists if we choose to have it, and then it only exists within our own domestic authorities, and that's an issue on how we come. It's not very combined, is the issue. There is authority and it's not particularly combined. That's not your fault, but I think it is a wider governance query that Councillor O'Boyle's bringing up quite validly.
I think it's political oversight and governance which is lacking here, and I think that's what you've spoken into, both of you. I think the other concern I have is that to what extent is the spending of money, and we're talking about big money, it is actually even over the combined authority area. There is some equity to it, you know, and to what degree we own that as well. I was just wondering whether you perhaps bring to us, perhaps at the next meeting, some detail of what's dropping out of the programme, what's being replaced. I would imagine it's in the
Yes, it is. Yeah,
combined the board paper, and the geographical spread, I think. I was going to say that one of the issues that you brought up was the spring programme being one of the things that would take up some of the slack. Now, I know at the Walsall end, I think that's a bit of a problem, isn't it, from a public perception point of view?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Chair. From a public perception, it's not been well received, and it's caused a lot of controversy and disruption. Where bus stops, things have all been put in, but there's no real benefit. Looking at the remit of the system, there's no real benefit being shown at all yet. So it doesn't tick any of the boxes. All you've got is inconvenience. So the public perception is quite negative on that. Can I just bring up another point? Why I've got the floor? Very specific on Sandeep, on the Aldridge Station one. We're talking about releasing of funds and, you know, wanting to spend it, but I'll just read exactly what it says. A change request has been approved by the Department for Transport, reducing the CRSTS allocation from 30 million to 3.635 million and removing all activity post outline business case stage. Is that a very nice polite way of saying it's been shelved? Was 26 million been taken out, been put back in, that you're saying, well, we have to use up somewhere and we're looking for things, but that one's been shelved, which was a project which had real public support and political support within the Walsall area. So I'd like some detail on that if I could.
Well, first of all, I can assure you it's not been shelved, and that particular project was not part of this report that went to CA board on the 9th of May. That was a project that was deferred back in the summer last year due to a whole series of capital cost pressures. And what was agreed was to maintain the level of funding that allows it to get to outline business case, which would then be coterminous with the CRSTS2 period to allow delivery funding to be moved into CRSTS2. So the development of the project continues as per the programme. That has not changed. And that 3.6 million that is still within that was sufficient to get that up to the outline business case point for the project.
Just come back on that, sorry, Chair. So in terms of the way this reads, a change request has been made and 26 million, it says reducing the CRST allocation from 30 to, let's call it 4, and removing all activity post, saying that still is a genuine bona fide project that will go ahead, but just at a later stage.
Yes.
Rather than being shelved completely.
I'm just trying to,
It's,
Councillor, if you can help me with the
if you just look at your project list and starts, it's the third one, second one from the bottom, authorization, delivery date, now start date, now delivery date, so change request.
Yeah.
If I could, would it be okay if I came in on that one? Sorry, and apologies for being slightly late. So the Leader of Walsall has picked this up with us. Laura Schoaf has confirmed in writing back to the Walsall leader and the chief executive that the Aldridge Station remains a commitment. It's just the timing of the project means that it wouldn't draw funding in this CRSTS period. So it's only needed to have the development funding in this period, but actually it remains, and we've confirmed in writing back to the leader that it remains a committed project in the overall CRSTS programme. So it's not been shelved. It's just the timing of when the project is actually drawing money means it's not in this period, it's in the next period.
Thank you, Chair. That clarifies that point.
Could I just come in as well, Councillor Hughes, on the political oversight piece? And apologies, as I said, for joining late. But I think what we need to do here is to take this into a wider discussion around the integrated settlement and the future process for prioritisation of the place-based and functional strategies, because they will determine how money is allocated in the future. And actually, CRSTS will be part of the integrated settlement from next financial year. So that understanding of the wider process about how the CA's collective combined money will be prioritised in future, and the process and the criteria for that, with the resultant need for political oversight in that decision-making process. I think if I take that as an action away, for myself and Ed and probably Helen to come back to the next meeting to give that oversight and clarity of what the proposal is, so you can help shape that future governance process for us to make sure that we're not missing that political oversight piece. If that's okay for me to take away.
I think that would be very useful, Linda, and I think it picks up the concerns that have been made.
And I hear the concerns, and absolutely I'll take that away. I'll pick it up with Ed and Helen, and we'll come back to the next meeting.
Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. I've raised, sorry, similar concerns as Councillor Bird and Councillor Boyle have done around political oversight with the Mayor last week, around issues around Birmingham, the transport delivery projects there as well, and how other sort of like non-appointed elected members have managed to have more influence than they should have in terms of delivery of those projects. So I quite agree with the actions that you're now taking, Chair. There's 2 points I wanted to raise. One's already been raised by Aldridge Station. I'm just intrigued to know whether £26.365 million that's now been taken out of the trust allocation will go. Will that just go into general pot for other funding? I think you've made a commitment to Aldridge Station in the long term. And second one was around the bus priority ex-city route package from Harborne to Castle Bromwich. It says that 50% of the funding now has been deferred, so that will have a consequence on the delivery. But why has that actually been deferred? It would be good in future if a reason is being given for the deferral of that project. It's something that there is large amount of support in the city for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mahmood. So the detail for both of those is within the board paper that went in July last year to CA board, when there was the capital cost pressures set out for those deferrals and how that funding was utilised. I don't have that information at the top of my head, but I can share the report and the table with you separately.
Could I just come in as well, Chair, please?
Yeah. Yep.
So just in terms of that question again on Aldridge and the allocation in CRSTS. So it's really important as a region that we maximise the spend of the CRSTS1 allocation. Not all programmes are delivering in the way that were originally thought or intended. Some are moving backwards, others can actually be brought forward. So as a region, what we need to do is maximise that, so we're physically spending as much as possible of the CRSTS1 funding. However, with one eye on the fact that this is we have got a CRSTS2, so we're effectively managing the whole thing over a 10-year programme, and the schemes that aren't going to draw as quickly, like Aldridge, are then just shuffling into CRSTS2 allocation. So the money is still there. It's still there across the 10-year programme. It's just in order to maximise the CRSTS1 allocation, there's been some shuffling of projects to make sure we spend as much as possible. So that's all that's happening here, is we are just managing the overall programme over across a 10-year period to make sure that we maximise the CRSTS1 spend. So the money is still there.
Chair, if I may, can I just come in on, I mean, Linda's made the point very well there around maximising the spend, and it should also be noted that the spend and our performance in CRSTS1 will have a bearing on what our allocation will be on CRSTS2. So at the moment we have a range. We're obviously pushing for the top end of that range, and it is making sure that what we do in CRSTS1, taking the right measures and mitigations where we see projects are potentially slipping, how do we maximise that spend, maximise the delivery of outputs and outcomes in CRSTS1 will have a bearing on the overall allocations that we get for CRSTS2.
I think it would be useful for you to also show the projects are slipping in from one year to the next, if that makes sense, so that we can see what's in the next stage, you know, across two, and how it's going to be picked up there.
I think that the two board papers are a reference,
Yeah.
The one from summer last year and the one that we took last week have that information.
Okay, so long as we've got some clear detail, I think the information is here, there, and everywhere, and we're not necessarily grasping it all.
Yeah. Well, at the time of writing of this paper, we didn't know if the CA board paper would be approved, so that's why we've just referenced it within this. But yeah, we can share those papers.
And I would like the last part of the sentence removed from the Aldridge Station commentary, because I think it is totally misleading. It does give the impression for anybody from the public looking at that, the vote against the shareholders, as you rightly thought.
I guess, yeah, it's quite a strong wording and quite, you know, doesn't require interpretation interpretation and removing of all activity past outline business case study. It's unequivocal, really.
Very final, so that
We
wording should not,
we can
that
rework
wording
that.
should not be in there, yeah. On that basis, that was for noting, it got a bit of discussion going, but it was for noting, is everybody happy on with some of the actions that have been picked up by Linda and Sandy? Yeah. Everybody happy? Jim?
I wouldn't say happy.
That's a consistent Jim statement. I've never heard him say anything different.
Thanks very much. Okay, on that basis, we move over to the item 6, which is presentation on WM4G update, please. Robert.
Thank you, Chair. So good morning, everyone. My name's Robert Franks. I lead WM5G, and the purpose of this update is to give you a quick overview of where we are as the business is a wholly owned subsidiary of Bitcoin. So let me just right. So I'll run through this quite quickly. So our mission is to work in partnership with the local authorities, with government, and with the private sector to make sure that our region gets the benefit of connectivity, mobile and broadband, and all of the other flavours for everyone's benefit, for the benefit of the digital economy that all our industries and all our sectors use. We're not a policy team. We are hands-on and we deliver things in partnership. And I want to talk you through in the next few slides our kind of 3 areas of focus and what we've delivered over the last 12 months. So our 3 areas of focus are firstly, and probably as you would expect, making sure that absolutely everyone in the region can access fast, reliable and affordable mobile broadband. And I'll go on the next slide to describe where we are, where we've got leadership and where we've got gaps and what we're doing about that. But just having mobile broadband by itself doesn't change anything. We also need to seize this as an opportunity to transform some of the fantastic public services we deliver and drive economic growth. And therefore, our second mission is around using connectivity, sensors, data, AI, etc., to work in partnership with the people delivering local public services to help people live longer and healthier lives and help with some of the local public services that many of us rely on. And finally, we're heavily focused as well on the telecom side of skills, so we can get more young people and more people changing careers as they go through their working lives into skilled jobs, and also helping other sectors drive adoption. And those underpin a number of the priorities that the Mayor is focused on, and also the government as well. So let me say a word firstly about what we're continuing to do on connectivity. So firstly, I'm delighted to say that we are in a very strong position as a region for connectivity. So I went through the latest stats actually on Friday, and 96% of the residential premises in our region have at least one broadband connection that's capable of gigabit speed going past it, versus the government target of 85%. So we're ahead of the government target, and in fact ahead of all other combined authority regions in this respect. And we have strong mobile coverage as well, given the work we've done previously in partnership over the last few years. But there's still more to do. So there are over 100,000 premises in our region, many of which are in deprived areas that do not have and are unlikely to get a gigabit broadband connection. Some of that is due to legacy issues. So literally in the 1980s and 1990s, people like BT Openreach, because it was cheaper, put cables into concrete in the ground rather than putting them into ducts, which makes the investment case for the private sector really bad. And so they're avoiding those areas. And that's a big risk of leaving people and communities behind. So we've got 3 objectives here, and I'll talk a bit more about what we've accomplished. So one is, as I say, to work in partnership to make it as easy and as simple as possible to get the connectivity out there in the right way to the right people and communities. The second is to make sure that our region gets its fair share of Project Gigabit funding from government. Project Gigabit, as you'll be aware, is the fund that government have set up to address these market failures. And the third objective is to raise awareness of social tariffs. So about a third of households are struggling to afford mobile and broadband during the cost of living crisis. Social tariffs provide a route where they can access much more affordable connectivity. The second area of focus, health and care. So we're working in partnership with all of our local authorities in the combined authority region, and also with the NHS integrated care boards to scale a number of technology pilots that we led as a region to really focus on how we can help more people stay well in the first place, how we can drive early diagnosis, and we have a particular focus on reducing bowel cancer through rolling out something called PILCAMs or colon cancer endoscopy. How we help hospitals be more productive through being able to manage their workforce more effectively, get people to the right place at the right time, and a variety of other use cases. And finally, help citizens be discharged from hospital and help more people receive adult social care in the comfort of their own home. Now, I haven't got enough time in this session to go through the social care example, but I will send around a link to the video where you'll hear from real citizens in places like Wolverhampton, Birmingham and Coventry using the service. But very simply, as one example of this, we've got now over 500 citizens in a combination of Birmingham, Wolverhampton and Coventry using what's called technology-enabled care. So these are packages of technology services that the local authorities, with our support, have referred to citizens, and they are helping people to be supported to live at home for much longer, to be cared for better, and to also help local authorities optimise all of the services they deliver with their scarce resources. And then our final area of focus is helping young people find telecom skills opportunities. So, there's a shocking stat that, something like 80% of the workforce in telecoms are over the age of 50. And the majority of those are men from non-diverse backgrounds. And at the same time, as a region, we know we've got a high youth unemployment rate. So we've been working to promote those opportunities with a combination of further education, with a combination of private sector as well, trying to get more people into those careers. And finally, we are also working in the manufacturing sector, firstly with the JLR and shortly with other manufacturers to promote the adoption of Internet of Things and other solutions that are helping them boost their productivity. So what does that mean? What have we actually delivered in the last financial year? So in the last financial year, in citizen terms, we've helped over 200,000 citizens get faster, more reliable and more affordable connectivity by making the planning system easier, better and quicker. Secondly, we've helped over 100,000 citizens to boost their health through a combination of our wellness programme, linking in with the combined authority and the local authorities, and provided more in-depth support for citizens in terms of things like, as I say, early bowel cancer diagnosis and supporting people with social care. And finally, we've helped over 2,000 young people to start on that journey to getting skilled jobs in the telecom sector. And our service is now live with Jaguar Land Rover also in their Solihull plant. In terms of, I guess, the sort of one of the key things for the investment board, where does the money come from to do this? So we have an objective which we call getting to break even. It means break even in our sense is slightly different to what it might mean for a private company, but essentially we want to get all of our funding from non-WMCA sources, and we're pretty close to doing that. So 85% of the money that we receive does not come from the WMCA. It comes from things like government projects that we bid for competitively and win. We get a little bit of commercial funding as well off the top of that. And in return for the funding that we do get from the CA, the remaining 15% of our funding, for every £1 we get, we pull in £8 of external funding and we deliver about £54 of benefits. So it's something we're really trying to drive a very high leverage around. And I should emphasise finally, if I may, Chair, that the funding we do get from WMCA is not just funding without strings attached. It's actually funding that is being provided to deliver specific services and objectives with our local authority partners that relate to some of the things I mentioned: accelerating connectivity, particularly those deprived communities, supporting digital inclusion through raising awareness of social tariffs, and also making sure that we are factoring in connectivity and other digital infrastructure as part of the devolution projects that are going on around investment zones. So that is that's that.
Thank you Robert, I mean, the one thing we can take from this is the added value that you bring into the combined authorities overall. I have some questions, but I'll go with Arthur.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Just one really simple question, really. I'm just reading this. It got up yesterday. Apparently, there was a report in the Observer yesterday, which has led to the Telecoms Minister, Sir Chris Bryant, asking Ofcom to look into the discrepancy between what is reported as mobile coverage and people's actual experience. So it says in your first slide here, 97% 5G coverage in the West Midlands area, or CA area, of at least one operator. Anyway, just by way of information, Worcester Council found mobile coverage in Worcester was more than 1,000 times worse than Ofcom and mobile operator data suggests, because they work with a company called Streetwave, and they basically put trackers in the rubbish lorries to find out. How do you explain that?
So that's a great question. So the numbers we've quoted in here are the Ofcom figures, and they do need improvement. So Chris Bryant has, as you say, rightly hauled the CEO of Ofcom over the coals. It's in the public domain, actually back in September last year. Nevertheless, although those figures are slightly optimistic, we're in a fundamentally different position to, I can't remember if it was Worcestershire or Warwickshire, was it Worcestershire? Because they're a more rural region. So in addition to the Ofcom data, we also do our own, what we call drive testing. So we literally have a load of phones and apps and we drive around and measure specific locations. So I think overall the minister's right. The Ofcom approach to data collection doesn't reflect the real on the ground customer experience. Although I do think we're still in a leadership position based on our own independent data, Ofcom have committed to come back at some point this summer and propose a new measurement methodology. Until we see that methodology, I've guided that I don't want to spend lots of money on putting sensors on bin lorries and other types of things, because I regard it as Ofcom's job to do that. They're not measuring it properly. In my view, they're not doing their job. So I think it's right to highlight it. I don't think we've got the same level of challenge as Worcestershire, given the rural nature of that region and the independent test. But the minister's absolutely right to highlight it, and I really do hope Ofcom fix it. It's not just about coverage, I should add as well. It's about the actual experience. So if you think about yourself, I don't know, travelling through Coventry Station or Birmingham New Street or something at a busy time of day, you may find that the coverage suddenly disappears because of the number of people around you. So it's measuring that actual customer experience and then, as I say, getting the support for the operators to fix it.
Any other questions? I have a few. You say there are areas that don't have the coverage. Can we see a map of where that?
Absolutely.
I mean, is there one area predominantly, or is it scattered?
That's a great question. So we have a digital coverage map, exactly as you say, that links in with the CA's mapping system. We can provide very specific details of where these premises are down to a postcode level. Yes, but it's not just one place. It is split across a number of areas. But I'd be happy to share where those are. And as I say, the main reasons are this issue of very concrete, and there are some issues around way leave agreements that we're fixing ourselves.
Is there any particular local authority area that suffers more than the rest?
I think it's best if I come back and give you the detail on the map, but I think it is predominantly in parts of Birmingham and the Black Country, but I will double check on the map.
Yeah, if you could provide that for us. You've talked about helping 33% of households that are struggling to afford. Now, I know that we've got a particular problem in Sandwell with digital poverty, and it's how we go. You're going to be going about that to address that with us. You know what I mean? It is a real problem for us.
Totally hear you. So at the moment, we're fairly limited in what we can do to promoting social tariffs, which the broadband operators provide. There are a number of areas where, working in partnership with yourselves and others, I'd like to see if we can go further. One example, which I've shared with Ian, is new social housing. So at the moment, new social housing isn't mandated by the developer to come with access to cheap broadband and indeed multiple broadband providers. And I think personally that's something that we should look to amend as we go through the sourcing for new social housing.
Okay, I really do think we need to be working very closely on that, not only our lots of so I'd like to know how that develops, please, as we all would do, Councillor Stone.
Yeah, I think the social tariff one is a must. I mean, we've got everywhere's got pockets of deprivation where accessibility is poor.
Yeah.
We also saw that through the pandemic with children working from home and other things. Just a technical point on your 97% coverage.
Yeah.
Is that 97% by geographical area or by people?
That's a great question. So it is a population figure, so it's by people. The geographic number I'll have to get slightly lower, as you may be aware, but given we're obviously a heavily urbanised region, it's probably not that far off. And I'm sorry, I should emphasise that's not only by people, but it's for one operator. So you may have a situation where, I don't know, you've got Vodafone, you've got coverage up here, but there's a problem with O2. So if you looked at the coverage figures for all 4 operators, it would be lower than that. And I can get those figures.
Another question in relation to the social care aspect. I know that you're working with three integrated care boards, but your partnership is with the 3 cities actually. How are things going to be developed with the other local authorities? What's the intention there?
That's a really important question. So unfortunately, we had to make a choice of starting with 3 because that was the money we could get initially from DSIT to fund it, from government to fund it. We have agreed with the Black Country Integrated Care Board that we're going to be rolling this out further in a more limited form, because within the resources we've got, to 2 further local authorities, which includes your own. So I can provide some further details on that. But ultimately, what we need to do, unless we can get further funding from DHSC or DSIT or somebody else, is we need to find a way of making this self-funding across the local authorities by proving the savings from effectively reducing spend on third-party domiciliary care visits to people's home to invest in some of this technology. So there's a big business case we're working on with each of the local authorities to evidence to try and provide that support. What I would say though is the 3 local authorities we have been able to work with so far have been absolutely fantastic. There's massive support to do this, and all of them have indicated that in some shape or form they want to continue the work. So we're at that tricky stage of finding how to fund it.
And I'm certainly back at the ranch. Samuel is chomping at the bit to get more of this off the ground. If you know.
Great.
One last question from me, and that's the skills adoption by young people. And I welcome the fact that you're. I think you're saying. 2,000 young people to access telecom skills. I'm sorry I'm being parochial again, but where is the question, and which local authorities and colleges are you working with?
So we've been working across the region as a whole. I can probably provide you with some more details offline as which specific events we've been doing, but we've been doing events over the last 12 to 18 months with FE colleges and others throughout the entire region. But I'd need to get you a list to confirm, but there should have been ones in your area. Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Stone.
Picking up on what your chair said, I think every political representative around this table through the budget process is coming up with demand pressure for adult social care. So working with the 3 cities as a pilot is great, but I think it's imperative that that's rolled out across the region so we can all see the benefits. We all have financial pressures, massive growth in demand in adult social care. I think that's a real key point to sell your project to the rest of the Metropolitan Borough Council.
Couldn't agree more. And as I say, if I could take an action to share with you a little bit more information offline about exactly what it is and where it's at, I'd really like to give a further update on that. We desperately want to scale it across the region. It's, as I say, a question of where we get the money from. We're pushing as hard as we can from central government and from local colleagues, ICB and LA.
Thanks, Jerry. If I may just follow up on that, I think it'd be very useful for us as not recipients of it at the moment to receive some feedback from the service users, from the Coventrys, the Wolverhamptons and the Birmingham, their experiences through the programme to see where it can be refined and whether it can be adapted across the region.
Possibly answer another report back with some of the questions we've asked and the detail we want.
Absolutely.
Give it another couple of months, 3 months, possibly.
That would be ideal. Yeah, we're running a dissemination event with the local authority partners actually in a couple of weeks' time. So that would be a perfect thing for me to do a report off the back of, if that's okay, Chair.
So everybody happy with our actions and noting the report? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Robert. That was really interesting. We now go on to the dashboard, and I'll pass over to Michelle, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So items 7, 8 and 9 are the public information dashboards for the funds managed by West Midlands Development Capital. As is usual, I will provide an update in the private session unless there are any questions.
Any questions on item 7, 8, 9? Shall we just start them? Everybody happy? Okay, we move on to item 10 then, and that's the exclusion of the public and press in accordance with section 1 today of the Local Government Act 1972, and the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business as they're likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information as specified in the paragraphs of the Act. Okay.